Thank you, Lieutenant Governor McLean, for your dedication and focus on all levels of education, from the very young to Montana's adult population, each benefiting from the educational trajectory which never ends. Please join me in welcoming the Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Montana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Seck. Now to live up to that extraordinary introduction, ladies and gentlemen. It is a remarkable opportunity to be here with each of you this morning. Montana's students are in remarkable hands. As I look out at the faces of each of you in this room, I know I am looking at the most fierce and tireless advocates on behalf of all student learning, no matter what the age. And I would tell you on behalf of Governor Steve Bullock and on behalf of your Lieutenant Governor, a great big thank you for the remarkable work that you do each and every day on behalf of student learning that makes a difference from Ekalaka to Eureka and from Pablo to Poplar. Ladies and gentlemen, we celebrate you and we thank you. Let us take a moment to thank all of you in this room together. It is always a treat and a pleasure to join my friends from across the Montana University system who do so much every single day on behalf of Montana's students, on behalf of Montana's communities, and on behalf of Montana's economy. Ladies and gentlemen, you are on the forefront of all that is good and excellent across the Big Sky state. I want to express my sincere appreciation to Commissioner Christian and his team, Dr. Seck, Dr. Moisey, Tyler Trevor, Ron Muffick, Susan Jones, and so many who may be in the room whose name I just do not have, but you are a remarkable visionary team who create opportunities for folks all across the Big Sky state, and I could not be more honored and humbled to call each of you at the Office of the Commissioner my friends. And together we look forward in the Bullock administration to continued work and partnership with you on behalf of all of Montana students and their family that we have the great privilege to serve. I would like to give a good shout out as well to Dr. McCaw and Dr. Matt, who are sitting in the back of the room. As I was a doctoral student studying in their classes before I would be pegged to become Montana's 31st Lieutenant Governor, I can tell you that there is excellence all across Montana's campuses, and I had the opportunity to receive my undergraduate, my graduate, and was working on my doctoral degree at the University of Montana. And I know that folks are committed, folks are dedicated, and folks are the finest champions all across Montana's campuses of the students that they serve. And I want to thank each of you from the bottom of my heart for the leadership that you provide and the leadership that you provided to me and now provide to students like me all across the state. It is always a great privilege and a pleasure to be with folks who understand and believe, like I do, that with education we can move the dial in all things. As Dr. Seck said, pillar number one of the Main Street Montana project is training tomorrow's workforce today. And I, with that, ladies and gentlemen, am very pleased at the request of Dr. John Seck to announce that today the United States Department of Labor announced that Montana colleges have been awarded a $15 million grant to expand opportunities for Montanans to gain skills and credentials for high-paying jobs in the healthcare industry across the state. Now I look to you to help the governor and I to continue to move the dial forward and to make sure that we do all we can as believers in education and as believers in opportunities for all that we close gaps that exist for our kiddos well before they come to our kindergarten doors. We know that 90% of a child's learning takes place before a child reaches the age of 5. Right now, Montana is one of 8 states that does not have state-funded preschool. I'm looking to you as educational leaders across the state of Montana to help us move that conversation from east to west and north to south in the Big Sky State. We think that opportunities at education, at opportunities to close achievement gaps, and opportunity gaps should exist for all kiddos, irrespective of which family they're born into and irrespective of which community they live in. I would call on all of you to find out how you can further support Early Edge Montana, and in doing so, close those gaps for all of those kiddos across the great state. Thank you very much for this opportunity to serve as your Lieutenant Governor, for this opportunity to be here with each one of you this morning, and thank you for your tireless advocacy on behalf of all of the students of this great state. Enjoy the rest of your summit.
So it is my pleasure to introduce you to Amy Sherman.
How's everyone doing? Oh, wow. Can you see me over this? This is the real always my challenge. I just want you to know I'm getting so good at Helena that I didn't need GPS this morning. I feel really good. I had to share that. That's called lifelong learning. I'm from CALE, and it's the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning. So let's see if I can get this to work. That's a good thing to try this first. Right hand. Yeah, I'm doing that. Maybe I gotta go this way. Not working. Can I? Nope. Nope. There you go. I'll just tell you to turn it. Love technology. Anyway, Council for Adult Experiential Learning. How many of you know CALE? Just so I get a feel. All right, not everybody here, but a lot of you. It's a national nonprofit. It's really important that you know it is a nonprofit. We've been around, this is our 40th year anniversary. Our focus is on adult learners. It's always been on adult learners, even in the days when people didn't really know what that meant. And I think our definition has really changed over the years too. We have a very broad definition of what adult learning means at this point, because we look more at what are the non-traditional characteristics in terms of who we're serving. We are known as national leaders in primary learning assessment. We call it PLA. We've been doing that the whole 40 years. That really is how we started. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we do a lot of other things too. We're very tied to how do you link learning to work. So workforce development, we actually have a higher education membership that we work to build capacity for institutions. We're very big in advising, lots of different strategies. You know, our view is you have to think of this as a system. And so we're very thrilled to be working in Montana because we see a system approach happening here. That's what we want to see. Why don't we move on? I was asked to talk, just to give you the 101 on PLA in just a few minutes, because some of you I think have, particularly those who've been on the task force and those who've been on webinars that we've been doing, you've been hearing a lot about this, but there may be a few people in the room who, this is maybe one of the first times you're really hearing in depth about PLA. And I think it's important to look at PLA in context, because otherwise it doesn't have the same urgency to it, in my view. The reason PLA is important is we are very behind in terms of producing credentials. I don't like to call it degrees, but meaningful credentials and degrees. So the issue here is even, if you compare and we do what we've been doing so far in terms of our production of degrees, we're still very behind. To try to increase the rate, this is at a national level, of degree production by 50%, to reach that goal of 55% is going to be tough, okay? If you can keep going. And I think what we've learned is youth alone won't cut it. I don't know if you know all the methods, I just want to make sure everybody understands it. I mean, even transfer credit can be viewed in some ways as PLA, it's outside of that institution, but I think more commonly we look at evaluated learning, like from American Council for Education, where they look, in a sense, at the input, they look at the course, or they look in military, they particularly look at the training that's been done, and some of the experiential learning. I know the commissioner meant experiences, but experiential learning can be looked at in PLA. if that evaluation is done and it shows there's college level learning for you to get a certain cut score, you may then qualify for credit. Standardized tests, I'm sure all of you know about CLEP, there's many other kinds of tests like that. Challenge exams that are done by your own institutions would be a part of that. And then portfolio, and the idea of portfolio is you document your learning. It is actually a very rigorous process. It's probably the most rigorous of all of these because you're having to write, you're having to do critical thinking, and you have to prove it up. And then you can't just say, for example, I've done a business plan. You have to show the business plan, you have to authenticate the business plan so your supervisor or whoever has to say, they did this work. And then you have to talk about the theory behind it. It's actually looking at the course outcomes and backing up from there and saying, can you prove that you have this? So those are the methods. And all of this is leading to credit. This says college credit, that's what we're here for, but it can also be for apprenticeships. It's used in apprenticeships, it's used for certificates, etc. What I thought was interesting is looking at the subject matters. We did a little scan of where the portfolios are coming from. As you can see, the biggest is business. Next, liberal arts, IT, finance, which is very tied to business, obviously communications, criminal justice, vocational. I think it'd be very interesting to see vocational get bigger. I think that's one of the new things that's going to happen with portfolio. We're going to see how do we document not something in writing more, but how do you do more visual. And I think also as more veterans do this, you'll see more criminal justice. I want to make sure I stay on time. Am I on time? I'm almost wrapping up here, so. I want to, oh cool, okay, I may even get us some time. This survey I thought was important because most people, you ask them about credit for prior learning or recognizing learning, they don't know what you're talking about. It's not commonly known among people, and that's a problem. It's a challenge that we have to face. And Lumina did a poll with Gallup, now it seems like a long time ago, February of 2013, and they asked, should students be able to receive college credit for skills and knowledge acquired outside the classroom? 87% said yes. That's big. That's an incredible statistic. And then 75% said they would be more likely to enroll if there was something like PLA. So I think that's important. And I think we forget that, these are our customers. These are the people we're trying to reach. We're trying to serve them. And this is a very clear indication that they want this service. And what we're seeing at the state level really excites me. This is a list, and it doesn't even have all the states in it, but several of the lists that Kale's been working with, and you're going to get to hear from Ohio, I don't have it on here, Ohio and Tennessee, about what their work is. You should know that Lumina, and a part of why Montana is doing this, is Lumina funded Kale to work with 3 systems around PLA. And we selected Montana, Ohio, and Texas A&M to work with us closely on how do we start to move the needle around PLA and work with institutions about this. So this is, this summit, part of it is coming out of that. It's not the only thing, but it's a part of that. So we're seeing a lot at the state system. And the things that I've seen is, one is getting task force and working groups together, which we'll discuss in Montana. Some are taking the approach of really requiring systems and institutions to develop policy. Others are actually directing institutions to work credit for learning. And that tends to happen more at the military side. There's a little more directive legislation or policy around that. I always end my presentations talking about people, because that's what this is about. I wake up every morning and I actually literally drive around thinking, have I done anything to help anybody with all this? I really sit and think about that, because I don't want to spend my life, and I'm sure you don't either, working hard and not feeling like you're making a difference, right? So Gloria is she used to be my office neighbor, but she works at Kale, and she is our CFO. Well, she lost her husband when she was 40. She had 3 kids to support. She was doing some bookkeeping, very bright, get it done kind of person, and she realized she had to get her BA. And really by serendipity found out about prior learning assessment at her school and said, I'm going to get my college degree fast. She took 2 weeks of vacation. Actually, I think she might have used a Kale publication to help her get this portfolio together, but it took her more than 2 weeks, but she really got down to it. She ended up earning, I think, close to 30 credits. I mean, something crazy. She went on, she got her MBA, her CPA, she got that while she was at Kale, and has risen through the ranks and has a very good career. That's the kind of person I want to try to make sure she gets a chance in this. The next one, Jason, which I have a picture of him, I have one. He was, he's a veteran, he was in the Navy. He was an observer on the SS Theodore, and he was trying to get his bachelor's in, mechanical engineering. And he was able to get close to a year of courses through doing a portfolio through Learning Counts. And often I have to say with veterans, you're gonna start with ACE, you wanna start with the standardized and then go to portfolio. But he had this incredible experience that saved him, and he is on his way now, because he wants to get a master's. And for those with GI benefits, you wanna use them in a smart, efficient way, because you can maybe get your graduate degree if you do it that way. So this was a big deal, and I mean, thousands of dollars a year of school. Not bad, right?
I want to make sure the lights are up probably as high as we can get them. I'm a teacher, and I mean that, and so this is going to be a discussion and a conversation, and not me standing back there behind a podium with that really unique kind of 1940s horror film lighting. That, I'm sure you're going to look great on the video that we're shooting back here, but what a way to set this up. First of all, I want to thank John and Susan for asking me to be a part of this program. It's always a delight to be back in the classroom, and I always envision these opportunities to speak with people as being back in the classroom. And I do want to encourage you to ask questions, stop me at any time. I really do want this to become a discussion about PLA. I want to give you a little bit of background about myself and my conversion, and there really was one, and there are some people in here that have heard me make some of these comments before, and some a week ago, some much more than that, and so they've had some time to ruminate about this, so they may actually have some really tough questions for me as we go through this. But if you're new to PLA, you've got some concerns about why we would be doing this in the first place, giving away credit and giving away the jobs of faculty, and I know some people think about it that way. This is what this hour is about. Let's address some of those questions and some of those concerns and get the issues on the table to talk about. As I was kind of getting into understanding higher education, I started at St. Cloud in the 1990s, and we had an institution in the state, Metro State, which was really set up to really handle the adult learners in the state, and in particular to award prior learning credit. It was pretty clear to most of us that weren't at that institution that they were handing out credits for experience and not for learning. All right, now, I don't know whether that's a true statement or not, but it was the impression of the faculty sort of throughout the system that this was not about really giving credit for learning or for courses, but it was for experience. And that, always left a nasty taste there. As I moved into the first part of the 90s, 1994, there's a big push going on in the accrediting agencies for us to write learning outcomes and assess our programs, not necessarily our courses, but our programs. And I came to the realization that I'd never thought about this. As a young faculty member, I knew students needed to take a certain set of courses to be a physics major. But what I hadn't ever done is sit down and think about what are the knowledges, the skills, and the habits of mind that a young person who has completed our curriculum should have when they leave, and write those down. Right? You're going to hear me mention those three concepts a lot. The knowledges, the skills, and the habits of mind that people in a course, in a curriculum, a major, in a gen ed program, ought to have when they leave. Right? And then, how do we assess those? Right? And as a physics professor, I knew how to assess those. Those happened in my classroom. It was the homework assignments that I handed out and I graded. It was the exams that I was giving. It was the writing assignments I was giving. And the skills were taught in the laboratory where they had lab tests, and I was watching them do these things. And the habits of mind kind of developed because of the way we asked them to do certain things. How were we assessing those, though, for the entire major? And we as a department wrestled with this a lot, and we didn't do a very good job. The other thing that I'll contend, and this is a conversation I've had with a lot of faculty members, and provosts, and deans, is some people will tell me, well, but I don't really know how to do that, right? I don't really know how to assess somebody that hasn't been studying in my class. They have to have the experience of my class for me to be able to make this assessment. I said, wait a minute. Go back to the 1990s. What was the objection to PLA? They were giving credit for experience. What you've just described is you can only give credit if they have a certain experience. Happens to be in your classroom, right? Now I can grade it. What? If there are truly certain learning outcomes, certain knowledges, skills, and habits of mind that are taught in your class, and you know how to assess those, and can accurately assess those, why can't you assess them if someone comes to you and says, here they are, let me demonstrate them? It is up to us as faculty to be able to sit down and write the outcomes, to write the assessments, to write the rubrics, to write the metrics, and to do an adequate assessment. Because the last thing I want to do is tell a student, you've got the credit, you've got the knowledge, you've got the skills, you've got the habits of mind that make you ready for the next course, and then they fail because they don't. That's my fear. My fear isn't that I'm going to give away credits. My fear isn't that I'm going to give away a degree. My fear is that I will set them up to failure. My other fear is that I'll make them set through a course that's monotonous and tedious and that they already understand. And so they quit. And they never get to a degree. So I have two real fears around PLA. And both of them are about us messing it up and not doing it right. Like I said, I want to make this a conversation. I'm only 15 minutes in. I've got a lot more we can talk about. But I think the important pieces that I really want to sort of open up a conversation around is how do we do this assessment? How do we construct an environment where we say, with our faculty, with our deans, with our provosts, with our chancellors, with the community out there, of how do we adequately assess the learning? How do we have that conversation? How do we get the ball rolling on our campuses so that everybody says, you know, this is actually a good idea? At any time, just stop me and we'll talk, but I want to, before we stop me, but I want to say, make one other remark too. I want you just for a minute, forget that you're an educator, all right? That you're involved in this industry we call higher education. You're an employer. You've got people that work for you, that have been working for you, that have no degree. Or you're just simply going out into the job market, you're going to hire people, right? And you're looking for people with a college degree.
And so Tennessee decided we need to figure out how we're going to increase our numbers, how are we going to help our institutions do more to improve student outcomes associated with not just the adult population, but also all students in general. So no legislation was actually passed about PLA, but it was something that we as the state and as the systems and the institution decided that is something that's worthwhile. We had some focus groups that we pulled together that realized that adults are a big underutilized resource in terms of potential students within the state, and those that need special adopted and adapted mechanisms put in place to help them complete their degrees within a timely manner and to come back to school as well. And also we realized that PLA is a particular tool that targets that population especially well, which is why we chose to work with it in particular. As Amy mentioned, all the efforts that we've done with PLA have been entirely focused on grant initiatives from Ford and from Complete College America. Now, as Amy mentioned, there was a Gallup and Lumina study that was done about likelihood of people to return, that PLA is making them much more likely to return. Also, there's a Kentucky study done in 2010 that found that those, compared to other things that would make people likely to return, including childcare, flexible course scheduling, online courses, and financial aid, PLA was the factor that was most likely to have someone come back to school. 2/3 of respondents said they would be much more likely to return if they had some form of PLA, which is huge. If you think about flexible scheduling and all these other wonderful things you're probably doing for adult students, PLA actually matters a lot more to a lot more people as well. So why are we focusing on adults? Well, we do because this, as a state, and it's similar to here in Montana, it's important to our economic development. It's also important to those individuals in terms of their unemployment rates and in terms of their incomes as well. So when they have these post-secondary credentials, it's important for the state and for the individuals as well. And also they tend to be happier, more productive members of society, as you know, is obviously important as well. So we very much want to promote those individuals within the state who can get a college degree. We have about 900,000 individuals who are adults with some college experience and no degree at all, which is actually almost the exact same size as our entire K-12 public system. So if you think about that, even if we graduate everybody in the entire K-12 public system, it would equal the amount of individuals in the state who have some college experience and no degree. So if we want to reach our college attainment levels, which for us is 55% by 2025, mathematically it is impossible to do that by focusing only on traditional age students. We just cannot do it. Even if we graduated all of them, we would not reach that goal. We have to get adults, and even just a small increase in the number of adults getting degrees would make a huge difference in terms of achieving that goal, which is why we're focusing so much on adults within Tennessee.
The other piece I want to talk about, we talk a lot in Ohio about being program rich and system poor. And I'm going to use a real example as it relates to PLA. As we started to work through some of this, we did a little scan and looked through things. 1999, Sinclair Community College won an award from Kale for being a leader in prior learning assessment. Great. So we figured, hey, we'll call up Sinclair, figure out what they're doing. So get the woman on the phone who runs PLA, and she said, well, actually, I just started here 6 months ago. The previous president, didn't really like PLA and had basically gotten rid of the 2 or 3 people in the office. So what's happened is here is this place that had been recognized as a national leader, in a short space of time, dismantled their capacity. And one of the things that's driving how we're trying to approach this is to think about it in a systemic fashion, not to have it be, oh, that's Jane in the office down the road who takes care of this. Think about how it touches each part of your campus, and because it does touch on the registrar, it does touch on financial aid, it does touch faculty in significant and meaningful ways, advisors. So how do the systems respond? So toward that, again, like Tennessee, and because of our context of herding cats, we did our next bit, which was collaboration. We brought folks together to say, hey, what can we do about prior learning assessment? Pointing out all of these things that we've done before. And we asked for a representative from each campus. And lo and behold, we got one. And just like Wilson's, it was entirely voluntary, and we didn't say who. So fortunately for us, like Tennessee, we got faculty, we got registrars and deans and the whole range of folks. And with this drive of trying to do a report and come up with best practice standards. So we had this overarching umbrella network, and then beneath that we had 3 working groups, one on portfolio, one on military, and the other on credit for prior learning. And they were all tasked with learning from each other and coming up with suggestions for best practice standards. So this gets to the next C, which is consistency. And you'll see, oh, I also want to point out one important piece. There were 2 handouts from Ohio. One, findings from Public Agenda. Before we even started from this grant from Public Agenda, or from Lumina, helped support Public Agenda. You don't know when they come and have conversations around tough issues. So we had focus groups of administrators and faculty to talk about prior learning assessment. And the Cliff Notes version says, administrators get it, they like PLA, it's good. Faculty, there's a huge range, and here there's some of the quotes from the raw focus groups. One was a faculty member who said, I had got prior learning credit when I started my career, I think we need to do more of it, it's a good thing. To another faculty member who said, and this is generally the quote, so you're suggesting that faculty give up their role? Isn't that like parents giving up raising children? So the complete range of perspectives on where PLA fits. But there's, what came out of it is the need for communication. And there's a lot of concern and anxiety from people on campuses. What does this mean? As Chancellor Nook had pointed out, it presses some points for folks so that they have questions, but data do show people come and they stay more, they earn more credits.
You've heard a lot today about why PLA in Montana, so I'm not going to repeat it again. Of course, maybe I should, but anyway, you know, we know that we have a lot of Montana adults in as far as the number of our population, about 138,000 Montanans with some college and no degree. We're looking to look at ways to re-engage those adults. Our Complete College Montana initiative, you heard a lot about that. Definitely we're on board with that initiative. Montana's population, as you know, is aging. I'm one of them. And, you know, definitely our population is aging out. I think we're about the 5th oldest state in the nation and soon to be 4th, if I'm quoting John Seck correctly. We know that working age population is going to be retiring out, and what are we going to do then? We're going to have a worker shortage by 2030, a pretty severe one if things continue as they are. And we do have data that shows, our good friend Commissioner Tyler Trevor sent me some data that shows me, and you all know this, that our high school population pipeline has leveled off and will stay flat for some time. You know, we do a really good job of all reaching out for those same students. I think we've got it down really well with our admissions and our recruiting departments. So, but we're all competing for those students, and it gets to be really challenging and very expensive. But those first-time freshmen are leveling off and will expect to decline for some time and hold flat through 2018. So we need to look at some other strategies now. Part of the educational part of this, we have done a series over the summer, a series of 5 webinars. The initial one is our PLA orientation webinar for our work group, but it's open for anyone to listen to because, again, it has some very interesting kind of preliminary discussion and thoughts about PLA. We also had a standardized testing webinar, understanding credit recommendation webinar, recognizing military education webinar, and finally a demystifying portfolio assessment webinar. We had about 200 total attendees in these webinars, so we're very happy with that. Keep in mind, this is online and can be viewed at any time in their totality, so I will make sure that as a postscript to this meeting, I'll send you that link again. Some of you already have it, but definitely if you haven't had a chance to, for example, listen about the military education piece, you know, you can listen to it at any time.
I still don't think of myself as a college student yet, though. I'm still this scared, shy, little, quiet Indian girl from Wolf Point. I still don't quite have that culture down pat. So as I enrolled in the fall on the quarter system, if you remember the quarter system, raise your leg. So we are, it's September, let's just say 25th, and thankfully someone had told me that I had enough information from Upward Bound that I could get credit for a Spanish class that I'd taken in high school. I'd taken 3 years of Spanish, hablo español muy bien, in Wolf Point High School, y estudiaba hace muchos años, y entonces viajé a Guadalajara. Pero I decided someone said, well, you speak very well. And I said, that's because I listened to a lot of tapes. I didn't have any teachers who were native speakers, but they were smart enough to know that because they weren't that good of speakers, they let me listen to a lot of tapes. So, therefore, I did really well in Spanish. Was told that I could challenge a class. Challenge a class, and I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Well, that means you meet with the Spanish department, that means you take a test, that means they determine if you can read, write, understand, speak, know where Spain is, and things like that. And I said, okay, all right, I think I can do that. You know, I love Spanish, and I've taken 3 years, so I should darn well be able to pass 1 year. So I went up to the language department on the 7th floor of the liberal arts building, and I take this test. And I decide I'm only gonna take first year because I'm still this shy, scared girl who doesn't have enough confidence to try for year 2, and besides I wanted an easy class my freshman year, so I thought if I took Spanish second year I could breeze through it. Anyway, I took this class, I passed it with A's. They gave me 12 credits of A, and they put it, thank you MSUB, you put it on my summer college transcript so I didn't have to pay for taking more than 18 credits. So by the time I was actually a first day freshman at Eastern, MSU Billings, I already had 18 credits because I had 12 credits of Spanish, and I had 2 other classes. So my GPA was like really high. And I just felt like a freshman. So that was my experience, my personal experience with prior learning assessment.
So when I was transitioning out from the military perspective, having no idea which way I wanted to go, and I was sitting back there and I was appreciating these paintings up here earlier, because when you're transitioning out, you have to make these decisions. Which path do you want to go down? And so I actually looked at Montana as a path. My wife and I were actually married in Helena, and we spent our wedding night here in the Best Western, actually. So nice to be back. But it was always our goal to get to Montana. Okay, that was our goal since we were married 7 years ago. When I was transitioning out, I was looking for programs that would help us out as a family and to build on my military experience. And so what ended up was, I decided to stick with language because I enjoyed the Persian language, and I thought I could continue to work for the government in other ways outside of the military. And the downside is there's only a handful of Persian programs in the United States. So University of Maryland was one of those, and they had one of the best ones in the United States. They still do. Not a big fan of them, but they still do. But when I transitioned out and went in there, I had no idea. About prior learning assessment. That was even an option. Nothing. I had no knowledge of military transcripts. I had no idea that I could get credit for my language training in the military, and it's actually fairly easy to get credit for your language training in the military. And nobody at the University of Maryland actually spoke up about it. And actually during that time period, when OASIS broke up, they were not actually accepting any military credit unless it was part of the, they call it ARU now, the Community College of the Air Force, or so it had to be one of those before they'd accept it. They've since changed their ways. 2012, there were a lot of changes across the nation as far as military credits go. But I wanted to get my master's in Persian. And so I go in and they say, well, you have to have your bachelor's in Persian before you can be accepted to the master's program. So I was like, okay, well, so I sat down with one of the professors and we had a conversation, and he said, oh, you're at advanced level. I'm like, yeah, I know, He's like, but you still have to get your bachelor's. So I'm like, okay. So I start the bachelor's program, and it was okay. It's one of those things where trying to be retrained on something I already knew, granted the vocabulary was a little bit different, but it was pretty tough. And I eventually just went, forget this, I'm going into the workforce. And thank goodness I did, because if I knew about PLA at that time, I would have fought tooth and nail for that credit, and I would have been in a graduate program. But if I did, then I wouldn't be here right now. It would have been 25 years from now, we would have moved back to Montana, as opposed to, just a handful of years.